At first, I thought it was a mistake. Rows of chairs, lights, tents, quietly appearing on land I legally own, pay taxes for, and never gave anyone permission to use. Then I found the forged permit with my name on it, and the fake email approving it, and the HOA president directing vendors like she owned the deed. Let me know where you're watching from, because things escalated fast. They thought I'd fold under social pressure. They thought a party would be too public for me to fight. They thought wrong. I stumbled outside in my pajamas, coffee mug in hand, trying to make sense of the surreal scene unfolding across my lawn. 5 workers in matching polo shirts were methodically transforming my private sanctuary into what appeared to be a wedding venue. White folding chairs were being lined up in neat rows, fairy lights hung from my oak trees, and a team was assembling a wooden dance floor right over my prized perennial garden. "Excuse me," I called out, my voice still rough from sleep. "What exactly is happening here?" The foreman approached with a clipboard, looking confused by my confusion. "We're setting up for the Caldwell-Richardson wedding this Saturday," he explained, as if I should obviously know about an event occurring on my own property. "Miss Caldwell hired us weeks ago. Everything's been approved through the HOA. He handed me a document with our neighborhood association's letterhead, authorizing the use of the property at 23 Oakwood Lane for community celebrations. I immediately called Jennifer Caldwell, our overzealous HOA president, my fingers trembling with a combination of rage and disbelief as I punched in her number. "Oh, Noah," she answered with rehearsed surprise. "Didn't you get my note? We discussed this at the March meeting. Your property has the perfect layout for Amanda's wedding. Everyone agreed it was the most suitable location." I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. "Jennifer, I never agreed to host a wedding. I wasn't even at the March meeting. I was out of town on a project." There was a brief silence. "Well, the minutes clearly show we had unanimous approval," she countered smoothly. I asked her to email me these alleged minutes immediately, which she promised to do when she got back to her computer. Meanwhile, more delivery trucks were arriving, florists, caterers, rental companies, all with my address programmed into their GPS. "Jennifer, I need everything removed from my property immediately," I insisted, watching helplessly as workers continued their setup. "The permits are already filed," she replied dismissively. "The HOA covenant gives us temporary usage rights during special circumstances. Don't be difficult, Noah. It's just for one weekend." After hanging up, I started photographing everything. The workers, the setup, the documents they'd shown me. Several of them looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing something was off about the situation. Within 20 minutes, Jennifer's silver SUV pulled into my driveway. She emerged with a clipboard and measuring tape, dressed for battle in a crisp pantsuit despite the early hour. "Noah," she greeted me with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Let's not make this more dramatic than it needs to be. Amanda's original venue flooded last week, and we needed a solution. Your property is perfect for her rustic chic vision." I stood my ground. "I don't care about Amanda's vision. This is trespassing. Show me the permits you claim to have filed." Jennifer flashed a document folder, opening it just long enough for me to glimpse official-looking paperwork but not read anything. "All in order," she said crisply. "Now if you'll excuse me, we're on a tight schedule." She brushed past me, barking orders at the workers who had momentarily paused to watch our confrontation. "I'm calling the police," I announced, pulling out my phone. Jennifer's perfectly maintained composure slipped just slightly, a flash of something, fear? Irritation? Crossing her face before she regained control. "Before you do something you'll regret," she said quietly. "You should know I've already filed the necessary community event permits with the county. The sheriff's office is aware and has approved. But go ahead. Call them and make yourself look foolish." I hesitated, finger hovering over the dial button when my phone pinged with an email notification. It was from the county planning office. A courtesy notice informing property owner Noah Mitchell that a temporary community space designation had been approved for my address for the upcoming weekend. My blood ran cold as I scanned the document, especially when I reached the bottom and saw what appeared to be my own signature, authorizing the whole thing. I spent the next 3 hours in a focused fury, determined to understand exactly what Jennifer had done. First, I called the county planning office, only to discover that Jennifer's husband's cousin worked there. Convenient. The temporary community space designation was legitimate, but required homeowner consent, which someone had forged. I forwarded the document to my former college roommate, Lucas Bennett, now an attorney specializing in property law. "This is straight-up fraud," he confirmed after reviewing it. not to mention criminal trespass and potential identity theft if she created false accounts in your name. Document everything. I took his advice to heart, setting up security cameras around my property perimeter before heading to my home office to dig deeper into the HOA bylaws and Jennifer's previous actions as president. A knock at my door interrupted my research. It was Deanna Chen, our recently elected HOA treasurer, looking nervously over her shoulder. "I can't stay long," she whispered. "Jennifer would freak if she knew I was here." Deanna had always struck me as reasonable during neighborhood meetings, often the lone voice of moderation when Jennifer proposed excessive fines or arbitrary rule changes. Inside, she handed me a flash drive. "Financial records from the past 18 months, she explained. Jennifer's been using the HOA as her personal slush fund. She charged her daughter just $200 for community event space. That's your backyard, while collecting thousands in donations from neighbors to help a local bride in need after a venue disaster. She's pocketing the difference." Diana's revelation wasn't entirely surprising, but the documented evidence was invaluable. Before leaving, she added, "Talk to Walter Harrison. He developed this subdivision 20 years ago and still lives on Maple Street. He has history with Jennifer." Later that afternoon, I found Walter tending to his immaculate garden. A retired man with time to fight the HOA's frequent complaints about his non-regulation bird feeders. "Not surprised," he grunted when I explained my situation. "Jennifer's been pulling similar stunts since she moved here 7 years ago. First as social committee chair, then as vice president, now as president. Started small, using HOA funds for personal landscaping, claiming it was a demonstration garden, then progressed to selective enforcement, fining people who opposed her while ignoring violations by her friends. He led me into his garage, retrieving a meticulously organized file box. Been documenting her abuses for years. Nobody believed me. Thought I was just a cranky old man with a grudge. 3 other homeowners have had property line disputes with her, always with the HOA mysteriously ruling in her favor, despite survey evidence to the contrary. While I processed this information, my phone buzzed repeatedly with delivery confirmations. A catering company wanted to know where to set up their stations. A rental company needed access to my garage for lighting equipment storage. A bartending service confirmed the location of water hookups. Each message was addressed to me, suggesting Jennifer had distributed my contact information as the venue point person. Most disturbing was the delivery of $5,000 worth of crystal glassware to my front porch, with an invoice in Jennifer's name but my address listed for payment. I refused to sign, explaining to the confused delivery person that this was all unauthorized. Meanwhile, I was making progress in my digital investigation. With help from Lucas, I discovered Jennifer had created a fake email account in my name which had approved the wedding use and correspondence with vendors in the county office. The email was created just 2 weeks ago, right around when the original venue supposedly flooded. Near sunset, I checked my security camera feeds and discovered Jennifer leading a contractor through my backyard. They paused at my custom-built shed where I stored expensive engineering equipment and materials for work projects. The audio was crystal clear. "This eyesore needs to go before Saturday," she instructed, gesturing dismissively. "Just add the removal cost to the wedding invoice. Noah won't mind, it's for the good of the community." I watched in disbelief as the contractor made notes and measurements. This had escalated from unauthorized use to planned destruction of my property. I immediately called Lucas, who advised filing for an emergency injunction first thing in the morning. Meanwhile, he suggested, set up more cameras and secure anything valuable. This woman is dangerously entitled. I took his advice, adding trail cameras in less obvious locations and moving my most expensive equipment to my brother's garage across town. As night fell, I sat in my kitchen, watching multiple screens showing workers continuing to transform my property in the glow of portable floodlights. They were installing string lights in trees, position markers for a catering tent, and unloading boxes of decorations into my garage, to which Jennifer somehow had access. A quick check showed no signs of forced entry, suggesting she had obtained a key somehow. Tomorrow would mark exactly 72 hours until this unauthorized wedding was scheduled to begin, with Jennifer acting as though my property was simply an extension of her event planning business. But I had no intention of being a silent partner in her scheme. The evidence was mounting, and I was done being caught off guard. When morning came, Jennifer Caldwell would discover that civil engineers don't just understand how to build things, we also know exactly how to protect what's ours. By 8 a.m., I had a cease and desist letter prepared with Lucas's help, detailing Jennifer's violations, complete with photographic evidence, security footage timestamps, and relevant legal statutes. I made copies for every HOA board member, hand-delivering them before most had left for work. Many seemed genuinely shocked, examining the evidence of forged signatures and unauthorized property access with growing concern. "Jennifer said you'd volunteered your space," murmured Greg Thompson, an elderly board member. "Said it was your contribution to community spirit since you travel so much and barely use that beautiful yard." I kept my expression neutral despite my internal rage. As you can see from my documented work schedule, I was in town for all but 3 days in the past 2 months, actively using my property and office for client projects worth tens of thousands of dollars. By mid-morning, texts from concerned neighbors began trickling in, many expressing disbelief at Jennifer's actions, but I knew confrontation was inevitable. It came at precisely 11:32 a.m., when Jennifer's SUV screeched into my driveway, followed by a luxury sedan. Jennifer emerged first, then helped a young woman in tears from the passenger side. Amanda, her daughter, the bride-to-be. I steeled myself, knowing this emotional manipulation tactic was coming. "How could you do this to a bride 1 week before her wedding?" Jennifer demanded loudly enough for neighbors to hear. "We've spent $15,000 on deposits already. Amanda's dream wedding is ruined because you suddenly changed your mind?" Amanda sobbed dramatically beside her mother, clutching a wedding planning binder. I maintained my composure, inviting them both inside rather than creating a spectacle on my front lawn. Once in my living room, I calmly laid out the evidence: the forged documents, security footage of Jennifer entering my property without permission, the fake email account created in my name. Amanda's sobs gradually subsided, replaced by a look of confusion, then dawning horror as she turned to her mother. "Mom, did you fake his permission?" Jennifer's tactics shifted instantly. "Of course not, sweetie. Noah's just confused about the paperwork. We had verbal approval." I played the security footage of Jennifer instructing contractors to remove my shed without my knowledge. Amanda's expression hardened. "You told me Noah was excited to host," she said quietly to her mother. "You said he was an old friend who wanted to give us his beautiful space as a wedding gift." Jennifer, realizing her emotional appeal had backfired, switched to negotiation. $2,000 for weekend use, she offered briskly, plus great exposure for future opportunities. Your backyard could become a regular venue space. I have 3 other weddings interested already. And there it was, the admission that this wasn't just about her daughter's wedding, but a business scheme using my property. "Not interested," I replied firmly. "Please remove everything from my property by the end of today." Jennifer's pleasant mask slipped entirely. "I've already reported code violations on your home office addition," she hissed. "Expect inspectors this week. And good luck explaining to the neighborhood why you're destroying a young couple's wedding dreams. I've made sure everyone knows what you're doing." True to her word, my phone began buzzing with texts and calls from neighbors I barely knew, urging me to do the right thing and stop being selfish. Jennifer had distributed my private number to vendors as well, who kept calling about wedding details, tent placement, electrical needs, bathroom access for guests. I contacted the county permit office directly, only to hit another roadblock. The official I spoke with seemed predisposed to side with Jennifer, mentioning her valuable community contributions and suggesting I should work things out privately rather than causing problems. Outside, a small group of neighbors had gathered at my property line, some taking photos, others speaking with Jennifer, who was gesturing dramatically toward my house. I documented the harassment while she loudly proclaimed that selfish homeowners shouldn't be allowed to hoard beautiful spaces that could benefit the community. I noted with interest that she was already selling this as a community benefit rather than her daughter's private wedding. Amanda approached me alone while her mother was distracted with the neighbors. "I'm so sorry," she said quietly. "I had no idea she did this. We can find another venue." Before I could respond, Jennifer swooped in, steering her daughter away. "Don't apologize to him, honey. He's the one being unreasonable." As they walked away, I overheard Jennifer assuring Amanda that everything is still on track and Noah will come around or face consequences. The implied threat wasn't subtle. I spent the remainder of the afternoon documenting every interaction, every trespassing worker, every item brought onto my property without permission. Sergeant Dawson finally arrived in response to my calls, but seemed reluctant to intervene. "Civil matter," he explained uncomfortably, though he did at least speak with some of the workers about trespassing laws. Most looked increasingly uneasy about continuing their work, but cited contracts and deposits as reasons they couldn't simply leave. That evening, after getting takeout from a drive-thru since my kitchen was now partially blocked by wedding supply boxes, I returned home to find workers had removed part of my backyard fence and were installing uplighting along my garden path. A printed notice was taped to my door. Official HOA violation. Your shed placement violates setback requirements. Removal scheduled for Friday. Cost of removal $3,000 to be assessed to your property. The notice featured the HOA letterhead and Jennifer's signature. I photographed it, adding it to my growing evidence file, then checked my security cameras. While I'd been gone, Jennifer had once again entered my property, this time using a key to access my back door. The footage clearly showed her measuring my dining room and discussing setup options with someone who appeared to be a wedding coordinator. They were mapping out space for a bridal makeup station and mimosa bar in my own home. The violation of privacy made my stomach churn, but I forced myself to think strategically. Jennifer believed she was winning through sheer audacity and community pressure. It was time to let her believe exactly that. The next morning, I approached Jennifer with apparent resignation as she supervised floral deliveries in my driveway. "You win," I sighed, shoulders slumped in defeat. "I can't fight the entire neighborhood, but I need liability protection if you're using my property." Jennifer's triumphant smile was almost worth the temporary hit to my pride. "I knew you'd see reason," she said, patting my arm condescendingly. "The community always comes together in the end." I presented her with a document Lucas had prepared, a comprehensive waiver that appeared to protect me from liability but actually contained carefully worded admissions of trespassing, unauthorized use, and property rights violations. Jennifer signed it immediately, barely skimming the contents in her eagerness to secure victory. "I'll need keys to your house for the wedding party to use restrooms and change," she added, as if requesting a pencil. "Absolutely not," I replied firmly. She frowned but didn't push the issue, likely because she already had an unauthorized copy. As soon as Jennifer left, I drove straight to Lucas's office, where we filed for an emergency injunction and submitted a police report for breaking and entering, complete with video evidence of Jennifer using a key to enter my home without permission. "Judge Reeves is on the bench today," Lucas noted with satisfaction. "He's a stickler for property rights. With this evidence, we should get a hearing by tomorrow." Next, I called my brother Ethan, who worked in the county records department. "I need everything you can find on Jennifer Caldwell's permit history," I explained, specifically anything related to event planning or property modifications. Ethan promised to search discreetly, understanding the delicacy of the situation. Meanwhile, I strategically relocated my most valuable possessions and work materials to a secure storage unit, leaving just enough in my home and shed to maintain appearances. By late afternoon, I had established a hidden command center at Lucas's apartment, monitoring my property via security feeds while following Jennifer's busy preparations from a safe distance. Ethan called with information more valuable than I could have hoped for. Jennifer had previously operated an event planning business called Perfect Day Venues that was shut down 3 years earlier for multiple permit violations and operating illegal commercial events in residential zones. She's been cited 8 times for unauthorized commercial use of residential properties, Ethan explained. Most of the complaints mysteriously disappeared after she became HOA president, but the county records still exist. This pattern of behavior strengthened our legal case significantly. Additionally, Margaret Willis from the clerk's office confirmed that Jennifer had submitted multiple property line adjustment requests over the past year, all involving subtle encroachment on neighboring properties for community enhancement projects. That evening, I meticulously documented all trespassing incidents captured on my cameras, noting timestamps and identifying individual workers. I installed subtle property line markers, small surveyor's stakes with bright orange tips, ensuring they would be visible in any wedding photos, providing future evidence that the event occurred on my property without consent. The next day would be Friday. 24 hours before the scheduled wedding, Judge Reeves had agreed to an emergency hearing first thing in the morning, which I would attend remotely to maintain the illusion that I had surrendered to Jennifer's demands. Meanwhile, Jennifer's activities grew increasingly bold. Security footage showed her leading decorators through my home, directing them to remove my framed engineering certificates from the walls and replace them with wedding photos and decorative items. "The house needs to look less masculine for the bridal party photos," she instructed, gesturing dismissively at my personal belongings. I sent Lucas a text watching this violation unfold in real time. "They're not just using my yard anymore. They're staging my entire house as a wedding venue. Time for the nuclear option. Lucas responded immediately. Documentation received. Judge Reeves is reviewing now. Stay put and maintain the appearance of compliance. It was difficult to remain patient, knowing strangers were rearranging my home and handling my possessions. But strategic restraint would ultimately yield better results than confrontation at this stage. I reminded myself that each intrusion, each unauthorized modification, each moment of Jennifer acting as if my property belonged to her, was strengthening our legal position. By allowing her to believe she had won, I was giving her the freedom to demonstrate the full extent of her entitlement and disregard for property rights. The final evidence came just before midnight when my motion-activated cameras captured Jennifer and 2 assistants entering my home using their illicit key. They spent nearly an hour moving furniture, storing my personal items in garbage bags, and transforming my living room into what appeared to be a bridal preparation area. They hung garlands from my staircase, replaced my bedroom comforter with a white duvet for better pre-ceremony photos, and mapped out locations for makeup artists and photographers. In the kitchen, they removed family photos from my refrigerator to make space for a wedding day timeline and catering instructions. This comprehensive invasion was exactly what we needed to demonstrate the magnitude of Jennifer's violations. As I watched them finally leave at nearly 1 a.m, I felt a complex mixture of violation and vindication. Tomorrow would bring the confrontation I had been carefully orchestrating, and Jennifer Caldwell would discover that appearances can be deceiving. Her victory celebration was premature. The legal machinery was already in motion, and by this time tomorrow, her elaborate wedding plans would collapse like a house of cards. Or, more accurately, like a house she never owned. I returned home at dawn, documenting the extensive changes to my property. My furniture had been rearranged or removed entirely, personal items placed in garbage bags in the garage, family photos replaced with wedding decorations. In my bedroom, I found a bridal gown hanging in my closet and makeup cases arranged on my dresser. The workers Jennifer had hired arrived at 7 a.m. sharp, continuing their preparations with the casual confidence of people who believed they had every right to be there. I said nothing, simply observing and occasionally taking photos that they assumed were for remembering the special day. At precisely 8:30, my phone rang. "Lucas, we're on. Judge Reeves has reviewed the evidence and granted the emergency injunction. Sheriff's deputy is en route to serve the papers right now." I suppressed a smile, nodding politely to a florist who was transforming my dining room table into an elaborate centerpiece display. At 9:15, a sheriff's vehicle pulled into my driveway. Deputy Marshall approached with official-looking documents asking for Jennifer Caldwell. One of the workers called her, and within 10 minutes her SUV screeched to a halt behind the deputy's car. Jennifer emerged looking confident, clearly assuming this was related to the permits she believed were properly filed. I watched from my kitchen window as Deputy Marshall served her with the emergency restraining order, explaining that all wedding preparations must cease immediately and all personnel must vacate my property within the hour. Jennifer's transformation was instantaneous. Her professional smile collapsed into disbelief, then outrage. "This is ridiculous," she shouted loud enough for the entire neighborhood to hear. "We have county approval. Call Judge Thompson." Deputy Marshall explained calmly that Judge Reeves had reviewed extensive evidence of forged documents, unauthorized entry, and property rights violations. "The order is clear, ma'am. All activities must stop immediately." Jennifer stormed to my front door, pounding until I answered. "What have you done?" she hissed, eyes wild with panic. "The wedding is in 5 hours. We have 175 guests coming." I remained calm, stepping outside to avoid having this confrontation in my home. "You forged my signature, created fake email accounts in my name, entered my home without permission, and planned to destroy my property," I replied evenly. "The law is quite clear on these matters." Jennifer's face contorted with rage as she realized her scheme was collapsing. "Your career is over," she threatened. "I know everyone in the county planning department. You'll never get another permit approved for any project. I'll make sure the HOA fines you into bankruptcy for every imaginary violation I can find." Her voice rose with each threat, attracting attention from workers and neighbors alike. "And good luck living here after this. Everyone will know you destroyed a young girl's wedding day." As if on cue, a luxury sedan pulled up, Amanda arriving with her bridesmaids, all in matching robes ready for hair and makeup. The young women emerged confused, taking in the sheriff's vehicle and their clearly distressed mother. Amanda approached cautiously. "Mom, what's happening?" Jennifer attempted to regain composure. Just a misunderstanding, sweetie. Noah's trying to ruin everything at the last minute. I hated involving Amanda in this mess, but she deserved the truth. I'm sorry, Amanda, but your mother forged documents to use my property without permission. She created fake emails in my name and entered my home using a copied key. I have all of this documented. I showed her my phone with security footage of Jennifer directing workers to remove my belongings. Amanda's expression shifted from confusion to horror as she turned to her mother. You told me Noah had enthusiastically offered his home. You said he was an old family friend who wanted to help after the flood. Jennifer's lies were unraveling spectacularly. The Willow Creek venue never flooded, did it? Amanda asked quietly, realization dawning. You canceled it because you thought you could pocket the venue fee by using Noah's property instead. Faced with her daughter's piercing insight, Jennifer's denials died on her lips. I was trying to save us money, she admitted weakly. Wedding venues are highway robbery these days. Amanda's eyes filled with tears of humiliation rather than manipulation this time. You charged me $5,000 for venue rental that you pocketed. You said it was a discounted rate from your friend. The gathered workers and neighbors witnessed this revelation in uncomfortable silence. Jennifer tried damage control, suggesting they could find another venue immediately, but the logistics were impossible on such short notice. In a moment that genuinely surprised me, Amanda turned to me. I am so sorry for what my mother did. This is absolutely mortifying. The situation grew even more chaotic when a local news van pulled into the street. Someone, likely Diana, had tipped them off about the wedding venue fraud. Jennifer attempted to block cameras, creating a scene that only drew more attention to the unfolding disaster. Watching Amanda's genuine distress, I felt an unexpected wave of compassion. She was collateral damage in her mother's scheme. After a brief consultation with Lucas by phone, I approached Amanda with a compromise. The restraining order prevents use of my house, but I could allow a modified ceremony in the backyard only provided your mother stays off my property entirely and you arrange for everything to be removed immediately afterward. Amanda's relief was palpable. Really? You would do that after everything? I nodded. The ceremony only. No reception, no house access. And I'll need written acknowledgement that this is being done without legal obligation, purely as a courtesy. Judge Reeves himself called to approve this modification when Lucas explained the situation. Compassionate but legally protected, he commented. Smart approach. With the ceremony salvaged but significantly downsized, workers scrambled to adapt plans while Jennifer was required to remain off my property entirely. A requirement she protested vehemently until Deputy Marshal explained that violating the order would result in immediate arrest. As wedding guests began arriving to confusion and hasty explanations, I noticed something odd at the edge of my property. A man in official-looking attire was placing stakes and taking measurements along my property line. When I approached and asked what he was doing, he showed me documents for Community Area Reclamation, scheduled to begin Monday morning. HOA President Mrs. Caldwell submitted these last week, he explained. We're converting this section to community green space as part of the Neighborhood Enhancement Project. I examined the paperwork, immediately recognizing Jennifer's latest scheme. She was attempting to permanently claim part of my land as community property, creating a permanent venue space for future events. The wedding ceremony proceeded awkwardly that afternoon, with abbreviated vows exchanged under my oak trees while I monitored from my porch. The bride looked beautiful but subdued, clearly embarrassed by the circumstances. Most guests seemed confused by the last-minute changes and Jennifer's conspicuous absence from the property. I used this time to investigate the surveyor's documents, discovering Jennifer had submitted multiple property line adjustment requests over the past year, not just for my land but for 3 other properties as well. Each modification claimed small portions of private yards for community enhancement projects, gradually expanding common areas under HOA control. When combined, these annexations created a continuous green space Jennifer could market as a wedding venue, explaining her comment about having 3 other weddings interested already. This wasn't just about Amanda's wedding. It was Jennifer's attempt to launch a new business using stolen land. I contacted Valerie Ortiz, a state property records investigator I'd worked with on previous engineering projects. This is a systematic attempt at property theft through administrative channels, she confirmed after reviewing the documents. She's exploiting her position as HOA president to file official-looking modifications that homeowners might not notice until it's too late. Valerie promised to flag all recent boundary adjustments Jennifer had submitted for review. Meanwhile, I connected with the other homeowners targeted by Jennifer's scheme. Carl Sampson, whose property bordered mine, was shocked to learn his landscape easement was actually part of the wedding venue plan. Jennifer told me it was for a butterfly garden the garden club was installing, he explained, anger growing as he realized the deception. Together, we gathered evidence of Jennifer's pattern of manipulations and unauthorized property claims. During the wedding reception, hastily relocated to a community center 2 miles away, Jennifer apparently made a toast that several guests later described to me. In her speech, she praised her daughter's flexibility in dealing with unreasonable neighbors and highlighted her own innovative approach to community space utilization that would open new opportunities for neighborhood events. This public admission of her scheme, combined with our accumulated evidence, strengthened our case considerably. I also learned from Amanda's wedding photographer, who stopped by to apologize for the confusion, that Jennifer had already scheduled 3 other weddings here this summer and had collected deposits from families. The scope of her fraud was expanding by the hour. With the immediate wedding crisis somewhat contained, I focused on addressing the attempted property annexation, specifically the claim on my land that would begin with removing my storage shed on Monday. Using my civil engineering connections, I contacted the city's permitting office and submitted an emergency application for demolition of my own shed. It's structurally compromised, I explained to the clerk, needs immediate removal for safety reasons. My professional credentials and clean permit history expedited the approval process, especially when compared with Jennifer's increasingly suspicious filing patterns that Valerie had flagged in the system. By 6 p.m., I had secured a legitimate demolition permit for early Sunday morning, preempting Jennifer's planned Monday annexation by removing the structure myself. I immediately called Mason Turner at Turner Demolition Services, a contractor I'd worked with on several development projects. Need an emergency removal first thing tomorrow, I explained. 6 a.m. sharp, properly permitted. No problem, Mason assured me. Smaller jobs are perfect for Sunday mornings. Minimal disruption to neighbors. We'll be there at 6. I scheduled the demolition specifically to coincide with the tail end of the wedding reception, which Jennifer had apparently extended into an after-party that would run until midnight. As the celebration reached its peak in the community center, Mason arrived with his equipment and crew, approaching me within earshot of several guests who had stepped outside for air, including Jennifer. We're all set for 6 a.m. tomorrow as requested, he announced professionally, just confirming, you want complete removal of all structures within this marked boundary, correct? Including that new archway they've installed? Jennifer, who had been pointedly ignoring me, suddenly whirled around. What demolition? She demanded, abandoning her pretense of disinterest. I showed her my approved permit. My shed was apparently violating setback requirements, according to your notice, I explained innocently. So, I'm having it professionally removed first thing tomorrow, along with anything else within the marked boundary. Jennifer's face drained of color as she realized the implications. You can't do that. We have plans for that area. In her panic, she revealed too much. The community space reclamation is already approved and filed. Several guests looked confused by this outburst, including Amanda, who had joined us outside. What community space, Mom? She asked. I thought you said the wedding drama was just about timing and permissions. Jennifer attempted to backpedal, but her earlier admission hung in the air. Just some neighborhood beautification projects, she muttered, unconvincingly. Nothing important. But Amanda wasn't satisfied. Is this related to those other weddings you mentioned? The ones you're planning to host here? The gathered guests grew quiet, sensing the unfolding drama. Jennifer's carefully constructed facade began crumbling as she realized how many witnesses were present for this conversation. Let's discuss this later, sweetie, she insisted, trying to guide her daughter back inside, but the damage was done. Questions were being raised, and Jennifer's scheme was now public knowledge. As guests returned to the reception, I noticed several of them talking in small groups, glancing back at Jennifer with newfound suspicion. Amanda remained outside, visibly processing this latest revelation. Those other weddings, she said slowly. You're planning to use Noah's property again, aren't you? Without his permission, just like you did with mine. Jennifer attempted denial, but her daughter cut her off. Stop lying, Mom. I heard you on the phone last week telling the Davidsons that you had the perfect garden venue for their daughter's August wedding. You described Noah's oak trees and the stone path. I remember because I was jealous you found such a beautiful place for them. Jennifer's expression hardened as she realized her own daughter was turning against her. "You don't understand business," she snapped. "This neighborhood has untapped potential that benefits everyone." Amanda shook her head in disgust. "It's fraud, Mom, and I was part of it." With that, she returned to her reception, leaving Jennifer alone with the consequences of her actions. As night fell, the wedding reception continued at the community center while I prepared for the morning's demolition. I had successfully disrupted Jennifer's immediate plans, but the larger scheme required further action. My security cameras captured Jennifer on her phone in the community center parking lot, apparently calling emergency contacts in an attempt to block my permitted demolition. But by filing everything properly through official channels, the very system she had attempted to manipulate, I had created a legitimate, lawful response she couldn't easily counter. My brother Ethan called with one final piece of information that cemented our advantage. Jennifer's event planning license had been revoked 3 years earlier following multiple violations of zoning regulations. She was operating her wedding planning business without proper licensing or permits, adding another layer of fraud to her actions. With this information, we were ready for the final confrontation that would permanently end Jennifer's schemes and protect not just my property, but the entire neighborhood from her fraudulent activities. At 5:45 Sunday morning, Mason's demolition crew arrived with remarkable precision. Jennifer was already there, standing at my property line with 2 men in suits who appeared to be lawyers. She had clearly spent a sleepless night assembling her defense team. "This demolition cannot proceed," one of the men announced as I approached. "Our client has filed an emergency injunction citing community property interests." Mason looked to me for guidance, demolition permit in hand. "The permit is valid and properly filed," I replied calmly. "Your emergency filing status?" The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Pending review. We expect approval by noon." Mason checked his watch. "Current properly filed permits take precedence over pending requests," he stated matter-of-factly. "We're proceeding as scheduled unless served with an actual court order." The lawyers conferred quietly while Jennifer grew increasingly agitated. "This is obstruction of community development," she shouted, attracting attention from sleepy neighbors emerging to investigate the early morning commotion. What happened next was better than I could have orchestrated. Amanda arrived, still wearing her wedding dress from the previous night, accompanied by several guests and her new husband. "Mom, stop this," she demanded. "You've done enough damage." Jennifer turned to her daughter in shock. "I'm protecting our business interests," she insisted. "This could have been the start of something amazing for us." Amanda shook her head in disgust. "You used my wedding as cover for a fraudulent business scheme. You lied to me, charged me thousands for a venue you didn't own, and now you're trying to steal someone's property." The gathered neighbors murmured in shock as Amanda continued, her voice carrying clearly in the morning air. "I filed a police report last night. Detective Rivera took my statement about the fake venue charges and your plans for other weddings here." Jennifer's lawyers exchanged alarmed glances at this new information. One quietly gathered his papers and slipped away, clearly recognizing a losing battle. As Mason's crew began work on the shed demolition, staying precisely within the boundary of my property as confirmed by an independent surveyor I'd hired, more neighbors gathered. Diana arrived with copies of HOA financial records showing Jennifer's misappropriation of funds and unauthorized property line modification requests. Walter Harrison distributed his meticulously documented history of Jennifer's abuses of power. The 3 other homeowners whose property Jennifer had attempted to annex shared their stories of manipulation and forged documents. What had begun as a simple demolition of my shed, the centerpiece of Jennifer's planned annexation, had transformed into a public reckoning. Jennifer watched in horror as her careful schemes collapsed around her, exposed to the entire community she had manipulated for years. By 8 a.m., news crews had arrived, not just local stations but regional networks, covering what was now being described as systematic fraud and property theft through homeowners association manipulation. Jennifer attempted to flee but was intercepted by Sergeant Dawson, who had returned with specific questions about the forged documents and unauthorized entry into my home. "We've received multiple reports that need immediate attention," he explained, guiding her toward his patrol car for a formal statement. County officials arrived soon after, freezing all HOA accounts pending investigation and suspending Jennifer's authority as president. The emergency board meeting called for that afternoon would be overseen by state HOA regulatory officials rather than Jennifer herself, ensuring transparent review of the evidence against her. The demolition of my shed proceeded as planned, removing Jennifer's claim to that portion of my property and symbolically dismantling her larger scheme. As the final wall came down, I noticed Elaine Winters, an 84-year-old widow from 3 streets over, watching with tears streaming down her weathered face. She approached me slowly, leaning on her cane. 3 years ago, they took the corner of my garden for a community butterfly habitat, she explained, voice trembling. It was where Henry and I planted our anniversary rose every year for 47 years. I fought, but who listens to an old woman alone? Today, watching you stand up to her, it feels like Henry would be proud. She squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Thank you for fighting for all of us who couldn't. By noon, I had filed updated property boundaries with the county, reinforcing the legal protection of my land against future encroachment attempts. State investigator Valerie Ortiz arrived to formally review all property line adjustments Jennifer had submitted over the past 3 years, discovering dozens of unauthorized modifications affecting at least 7 properties in the neighborhood. This is one of the most brazen cases of administrative property theft I've seen, she commented to the assembled officials. She was essentially creating a shadow map of the subdivision, gradually shifting boundaries to create commercial spaces under HOA control. Jennifer's real estate license was suspended pending investigation, cutting off her primary income source and professional credibility. 6 months later, our neighborhood had transformed. Diana Chen was elected as the new HOA president, implementing transparent operations and strict protections against the abuses Jennifer had normalized. Jennifer herself faced multiple felony charges: forgery, breaking and entering, attempted property theft, operating an unlicensed business, and fraud. She was required to pay substantial restitution to Amanda and the other families who had paid deposits for unauthorized wedding venues, plus additional damages to homeowners whose properties she had attempted to modify. Most significantly, she was barred from serving on any HOA board or community organization in the county, a professional death sentence in her circles. She eventually moved away, unable to face the neighbors she had manipulated for so long. As for me, I hosted a legitimate neighborhood gathering in my newly landscaped yard once the legal matters were settled. Before the event, I installed a series of professional survey markers at my property boundaries, each one certified and registered with the county. But I didn't stop there. I added a permanent property boundary no trespassing sign at each corner and prominently displayed the framed demolition permit on my fence like a victory declaration. As neighbors arrived, many took photos beside these symbols of resistance, some even bringing their own property documentation to share. It was a cathartic community reset, a chance to reclaim spaces that had been weaponized by Jennifer's schemes and transform them into genuine gathering places based on mutual respect and clear boundaries. As I placed the last marker, my neighbors spontaneously applauded, a simple gesture that acknowledged not just my victory, but our collective return to property rights and community trust. Jennifer had claimed to be building community while actually destroying it through deception and entitlement. Our true community emerged in the aftermath, stronger for having exposed the fraud and committed to protecting each other's rights going forward. At the gathering, Amanda approached me with her husband. "I wanted to thank you again," she said sincerely. "You could have pressed charges against me too as part of my mother's scheme. Instead, you showed compassion when I didn't deserve it." I assured her that she had been another victim of her mother's manipulations, not a willing participant in the fraud. "Your honesty helped expose the full extent of the scheme," I reminded her. "That took courage." She smiled sadly. "I'm still processing everything, the wedding, the fraud, learning who my mother really is. But I'm grateful the truth came out, even if it wasn't the wedding day I imagined." As she walked away, I reflected on the strange journey from that first morning when I discovered workers installing a wedding arch in my backyard. What began as trespassing had revealed a pattern of fraud that might otherwise have continued undetected for years, gradually eroding property rights throughout the neighborhood. The demolition crew, ironically, had become neighborhood heroes, the catalyst that exposed Jennifer's schemes and protected everyone's property from her systematic encroachment. Mason even received several legitimate contracting jobs from neighbors impressed by his professionalism during the confrontation. It was a reminder that sometimes protection requires decisive action, removing structures that don't belong before they become permanent claims on what's rightfully yours. In the end, the wedding Jennifer planned in my backyard without permission did bring the community together, just not in the way she intended. It united us against fraud and manipulation, establishing clear boundaries and genuine respect as the foundation for true community bonds. And those are values worth defending, one property line at a time.